Okay, so we know the brief. Let's get started. First thing we're going to do is going to choose some cloth to work with. So as we know, under template prop, we have a physics props section down here. Now, you've already worked with these ones, which are the ones that use a bitmap to control where the object is pinned. But we're actually going to use these ones here, which are called cloth template pin. And this is more flexible when it comes to doing more complex animations, because you can't really animate the pins for the bitmap version. So I'm going to start with this 4.1 here. It's called pin 4 points. So let's just double click and bring that in. And before we do anything next, I'm just going to set my workspace. So as you know, I always like to set up my output format. I'm just always going to go to a 16:9 format, which is one of my standards. There we are, 720 will do. DD, and do the same for video. Just set it to 720p. Right, so I've got widescreen, which is pretty much standard these days. There we go. Right, now before we do anything with this piece of cloth, we want to figure out how big it is, because right now if I sim this, you can see it's all working, and there's these 4 arrows are the actual items the cloth is pinned to. But one of the things you'll find out is this cloth is actually really quite large at the moment, and you can't really tell. Let's get a character in so we can see the actual size. I'm going to pop back to standard workspace, go to my avatar tab. Now under custom, I've made some characters straight out of CC. These are the default characters, and all I've done is put on, because it's about towels and a towel rail, I'm just going to assume some kind of bathroom scenario. So we now have a character, and as you can see, the clothing is actually pretty big. So if I move my chap over here and I bring in my other character, who I've called Ivy for no good reason, and I'm just going to bring her over there, the first thing we can see is that's one big towel. It's huge. That's a bed sheet, really. So this is the first thing to fix. In fact, there's 2 things to fix here. One is you can't see it from the rear. That's a simple material assignment. As we go to fix this, let's go to a scene and actually have a look at what we're dealing with. The thing you'll note about this cloth item is that it's actually a group of objects. It's got attachments. So if we open it up, you'll see we have these dummy arrows, which are the 4 arrows at the top that are acting as the pins. And we have the cloth mesh itself. And then all of these are actually under a group, and this group is an invisible object. It's actually a plane object. Everything's kind of under that group. First thing I'm going to do is just whip around the back. I'm going to select the cloth mesh, and I'm going to go to material and make it 2-sided. And that will allow us just to see it regardless of which way around it is, because it's obviously a one-sided object. Now, why are we using this piece of cloth instead of one of the other ones? Well, the reason is that it allows for the fact that you've got these 4 pins which can be animated. And not only can these 4 arrow pins be animated, but you can also animate the root of the entire structure as well. And that makes it quite flexible. So that's the first thing. Now, how is this created? The actual answer to that is I don't know, and I suspect there's a load of scripting involved in this particular prop, because if you actually go and analyze the structure of all of this, and you go looking to see how it's all put together, what you'll discover is that these items are all just attached to this object here, and there's no other obvious thing going on in the scene that I can find that deals with how the arrows are pinned to the cloth. So I suspect there's some scripting going on in the background, which is creating all of this. So that means we just have to work with one of these templates. We have to just kind of make it do what we want it to do based on the type we've chosen. Now I could have chosen one of the other ones in the content library. As you can see, there's a number, but there is a reason I've chosen this particular one. That's because part of the action that we want to do is we want to end up with being able to wrap this cloth around. I'm going to wrap it around the waist of this female character, Ivy, and to do that I want the controls for the cloth to be at the top edge, and I want enough control points to be able to do a wrap around her waist. Now I could use this 7.1 here, but that's take a lot of effort to animate. But if you kind of decide you want to play with that after you've seen how I do this, then obviously feel free, have a go yourself. So now that we've done this, let's make the cloth a decent size, because it's a bit sort of big. So I'm just going to globally select the top root of the whole lot. So that's the main root here. And I'm going to hit scale. I'm just going to literally scale it down. And what I'm looking to do is to make this roughly the size of a towel. So let's W, and let's bring it down. And I'm going to use our female character, who we're going to do the wraparound, as a guide for this. I'm going to have a look at her and sort of say, well, how big do I want the towel to be? So I think I'm just going to do something like that. Maybe even scale it just a little bit like that, and then drop it down. So I think that size relationship, we'll have a go with that. We could go for a smaller one, but again, as I say, we want it to be able to wrap around our waist a bit. So we'll see how we do with this. Actually, let's just make it a little bit smaller globally. Maybe something like that. There we go. Okay, so this is our starting point for the size of the cloth that we want to work with. So that's good. Just to be nice, I'm going to select the cloth item itself here. I'm going to go back to the material editor. Actually, I don't even need to do that. I'm just going to go to Content Manager. Let's go to Materials. Let's just put something on it so that you actually have something on there. It looks like it's a bit less interesting than... Actually, let's go into Texture. Find something suitable in here. Carpet. Why not? Now, I've actually dropped that onto the, as you saw, onto the whole thing there, because this is the problem, as you know, with things that are attached. You tend to put things on, it tends to pick up on the top level object rather than the ones that are nested underneath. So let's just make sure we've got the cloth selected. And let's go back to Content, and let's drop that into the diffuse slot. There we go. So now we have something, now we have a nice colourful scene. Now the other thing we want to do is we want to make these arrows dummy objects so that they don't show up during render time, because at the moment the top level object is set as a dummy, although to be honest it doesn't show up when you turn dummies on and off anyway. But let's just do the arrows and go and set these to be dummy objects, like so. The other thing I tend to do is I tend to hit name up here and organize the tree here so that the arrows are listed from 1 to 4, and that way we know which one's which. Control D to unhide again, so now we can see them. Okay, so there we go. So we've got the start of our scene. I think I'm going to save this, which would be a super good idea. So I'm just going to save it here. So let's call this towel test. Tower test? Towel test. There we go. Right. So we have our two characters, and we have our towel. So let's go, and I'm just going to move our mesh into a start position. So let's just zero everything out. Now I'm not going to zero out using these buttons here, because when I do that, that'll actually, if I reset the scale, for example, I'll get that, which I don't want. So let's just start our cloth at world 0 and lift it up into the air a bit. And then we'll just move our two characters back. So this is going to be our kind of starting position. Right, okay, there we go. Now, because the name of the project hasn't taken up here, which is the usual iClone thing, I'm just going to come back here, and I'm going to just overwrite. Now that name is up here, which means I can just hit the save button from now on, which will be a lot quicker. Okay, so we actually have a kind of simulation system here, because if I now just run this, you can see the cloth bouncing. So that's the first thing. So we know there's a simulation going on. And you can actually just get your animation. If I select this main object, and I am going to go forward in time just a short distance, and bring it right over there, and hit stop, you can now see we have cloth behaving like cloth. So that's kind of cool. Let's remove the object animation. So there we go. So this is all kind of going to start behaving the way we want it. Let's bring in let's get a towel rail in, shall we? That's what I want to do. So content, props, I am simply going to go 3D blocks for this. And I am going to use a cylinder. And I am going to make sure, Control Z to undo that, I'm going to hit Control E, angle snap. I've got my angle snap set to 15 degrees. So that will nicely snap that in position. And let's move this up, and let's move it over, and let's scale all the way down till we get a rail size thing. Stretch it out. Right. Okay, so what we're doing here is we're going to make our towel rail, and I'm not going to do anything more than make a tube like this. I don't think we need anything more complex for this demonstration, and you can make a more complex towel rail once you see how this whole trick works. Okay, so there's our towel rail. I'm going to remove object animation because I managed to do this away from timecode 0, which is always annoying when you do that. So the next thing we need to do is we need to lay our towel over the towel rail, because we're going to have to do a simulation that runs for the entire length of our animation, but also gives us the starting position of the towel over the towel rail. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to actually animate the object to actually get it to kind of do this kind of hanging over the rail trick. Okay, so that's the first thing I'm going to do. So let's go to the scene manager. I'm going to select our overall object right at the top of this and lift it just up a little bit more. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to make it so that the top of the towel wraps over, but not evenly. I'm going to have a small bit of the towel on this side of the rail and much more on the other side. And that's a cheat because it's actually quite hard doing this kind of technique. So we're going to have to accept the fact that we need to give this character something to grab hold of. We're not going to be able to grab we're not going to be able to grab the towel in its middle here or anything like that, because we're not using one of the ones that has a pin in the center. And if we did use one of these that has the pin in the center, it would make it very difficult to go from this type of towel to one that will wrap around the woman's waist. So this is the reason I'm using this particular kind of setup. Let's get the towel over the railing, and the way we're going to do that is we're literally going to animate it into position. So I'm going to switch to frame mode, 60 frames a second, of course, in iClone. So let's come down here. I'm just going to type in 60 to go forward 1 second in time, and I'm going to move forward until what I've done now is I've moved the cloth to the other side of the rail. So let's wind back and sim this. Now remember, it's in real time at the moment, so let's switch to frame by frame, which is much more accurate for simulation, so always a good thing to do. And now nothing happens because we didn't kinematic the object. So let's go physics, activate physics for the object. We've done this at timecode 0 or frame 1, and we want it to be a static object, so it's not going to go anywhere in our simulation at all. And now let's sim, and there we go. As you can see, we have the start of the cloth being able to be wrapped over the object. Now, the first thing you're going to see is there's a very big bounding box going on around it. So the cloth is kind of some distance from the surface. The other thing is it's a rectangle, and that won't look as elegant as a curved surface. Let's just do the second stage. I'm going to switch to my animation workspace. so I can see my timeline. And I've already, as I said, animated this top object here to this position. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to 120, which is 2 seconds in. And I'm actually going to bring it down so that the arrows are below the height of the rail. So this is where the top of the towel is going to end up. So let's bring it in a bit closer and then play that. You can see kind of what's happening there. It's being pulled down and over the rail, except we have this issue with the size of the offset away from the rail. To make that work, we have to do two things. First thing is we need to reduce the bounding. So let's have a look. Right, so this is the one, soft versus rigid collision margin. And this is obviously set at the moment for the much larger scene we had. We've scaled everything down, so as you can see, we've got this big kind of collision margin around the object. So we need to drop this right down. Let's try 2. You can see that's better. But and obviously we're getting past it there, don't worry about that. Probably even want to be closer, so let's do 1. I'm just going to go around. We just want to see how close it'll get to the actual. So that's not bad. So how to fix the pass through there? Well, we're dragging the cloth over a box, and we're actually, you know, if you think about it, this isn't really a box at all. It's a cylinder. It's a rail, a round rail. So we'll improve the collision accuracy by having more things to collide with, because this is just colliding at the moment with a couple of sides of this box. So let's go. I've got the cylinder selected. So now in the physics section for the cylinder, we're going to switch the bounding type to convex hull. And now, as you can see, that matches very nicely the actual rod, or kind of the rail itself. If we play that back, you can see we get a better result. Although we're still getting that bit of a pass through there. Now, one thing about this particular piece of cloth is it's not really a good type of cloth for a towel. It is actually it's more like, not satin, but it's very thin. So towels are, generally speaking, a bit more robust. So I'm going to select the cloth mesh, go to physics, make sure you go to the presets. I'm going to turn it to denim by double clicking on that. So now we should get a much stiffer cloth. There we go. What's nice about the stiffer cloth is it will stop moving quicker, because obviously when the towel is on the rail you don't want it really to be moving. So if you watch now, after the first animation is finished, it pretty much comes to a static stop, which is exactly kind of what we want. So as you can see, we've actually got the start of what we're after here. We have laid the towel over the rail and got it into kind of its starting position. Now we've still got this kind of gap around it, but you always have to kind of have some kind of compromise with physics stuff. We could try lowering that collision more. So let's just drop this down to 1 and try that. And there we go. That's even better. So I think that will probably be good for the collision margin. And there we go. So what we've effectively done is we just kind of rolled the towel over the rail and left it in this static position, which means that somebody can now grab grab it along this edge. So that's kind of good. So what we want to do now that we've done that, I'm going to actually turn baking on now so that I can watch this after the event. So if I come to project settings, which I've actually got linked into my panel here, let me pull it out. There we go. Float it like it normally is for most people. So what we want to do is we're going to turn on bake here. So that's going to turn that on. And that of course means that if we come to here and we go to cloth mesh and turn on soft cloth, we'll now see the cloth sim appear in the timeline, because without bake on you don't get anything appearing in the timeline. So if I turn that off and I do a sim and I stop, nothing appears in the track. Okay, but if I turn on bake animation and sim from the beginning and pause. There is our cloth sim. And once we've done any kind of cloth sim like that, for example, if I just zoom the timeline out, Alt mouse wheel, let's just run it past the last frame where it goes from there, comes to stop. And then I turn this off. As you know, when you turn the rigid and soft body system off completely up here, this is now a baked animation. So that is no longer simulating, and it'll always play the same way every time. It also means you can go back to turning real time on, and this is now real time. There we go. So that's kind of the main thing when you're working. So now that we've got bake on, I am going to just turn this back on, and that means that when we want to analyze the shot, we can simply turn these off, knowing that we can scrub the timeline and see exactly what the cloth is doing as we're animating it. Okay, so that's a good place. So what we're going to do now is we're going to start working on how our characters can interact with this towel and actually kind of work with it. Let's get our actors in the right position to get this all working. First thing we want to do is make sure our male character who's going to pick the cloth up and pass it, the towel, can actually do that in a reasonably elegant fashion. So let's hide our female character. I'm just going to rename these because I didn't name them properly. So that's Ivy, and this is Sean. There we go. That'll make it a bit easier. So let's bring Sean over, and he needs to be able to reach in a sort of reasonably elegant fashion for the towel, so that he can kind of pass it over to his colleague. So let's say we want him to kind of reach with this arm here. I'm just going to go and see whether he can do that. So I'm just going to grab and just do a bit of bending. I would say he's probably sort of having to lean down a bit too far. I think probably the best thing is to maybe have the towel rail raised up a bit, so he doesn't have to lean over so much, because I think that's looking kind of a bit ugly. So let's just actually let's just pin his hand. So let's pin that one there and bring him back up. So that's the extreme he's at there. So he's going to have to bend down. Something like that. I mean, he's looking a bit odd this way. So let's just straighten him up a bit. That's a bit more natural. And remember, we want his hand's going to be at the bottom of this bit of the towel as it wraps over. So we know that the towel kind of wraps over like that. That's him in the way of the towel, so I won't worry about that. I should have just baked the sim, which I can do. So let's do that. Just going to hide him and quit out of here. Let's just bake the sim, so frame by frame. So even with him hidden, as you can see, he's still part of the simulation. So let's get him right out of the way. Over here. Right, and then just turn that off. So now that's baked. Go back to frame 1. I'm just going to bring him back again. So really we need to bring the whole simulation up, from where it is at the moment. So let's grab the cloth. In fact, let's grab both of these together and just lift them up. So we want maybe somewhere like this, because obviously if you remember, the cloth bends over and drops over this bar and comes down to about here. So we want to kind of bring it up to a height where he's not going to have to bend too far to grab the rails. So let's go maybe something like there. So let's try that. So I think Let's drop that tool. Obviously, we'll now have to ultimately re-sim, but for the moment, let's just grab Sean and move him out of the way. And just turn the simming back on. Now we'll have to change the animation slightly because obviously we animated the arrows. The main one here has been animated. You can see that the towel's been pulled over the rail much further than I had it before. You can obviously play around with this, but we can see where the pull's done. It's kind of all the way down to this keyframe here. So let's just jump to that transform key. And all we really need to do to fix this is bring it up to the height we want, how much of it we want wrapped over, and then wind back to the beginning and resim. Like so. There we go. So that's now got our towel around the right place. Let's turn off the physics so that we can just scrub that. There we go. So we now got something that's scrubbable. Back to frame 1. Right, so let's bring Sean back. Stick him here. Maybe it's back a bit. And then I'm just going to scrub and see where the end of the towel ends up. And that's pretty good. You can see there that he's now in a position where he can grab the end, the edge of the towel without looking like a complete idiot. Okay, good. So we've got Sean in the right place. So I think the next thing to do is actually to just give him some action, like an idle or something. Now, do remember that we're going to be chopping off the first 2 seconds of this animation. Obviously, once the towel is simulated into position, we want to start the scene with the towel already wrapped around the towel rail. So that means that, once you have to sim the entire timeline, but when you come to render, you're effectively going to be setting your render range so that you don't get any of the simulation at the front end. Oh, obviously you can render the whole thing and just cut it in and edit, but that's kind of your call. Okay, now that we've done that, let's give Sean sort of a starting idle. So I'm just going to go to the first frame, Content Manager, Motions, G6, Mason. Let's have a look. Yeah, it's quite a subtle one, which is good. I'm going to let this run out quite a bit on the timeline so that we've got plenty to play with, because as you know, we're going to be kind of animating over this. There we go, that should do the job. Okay, so now we have, if we switch to real time, so now we've got Mason ready to grab the towel. And what we want to do, I say Mason, we've got a Sean. Let's get our other actor back. Let's get Ivy back. We now need to give her a starting position. And basically, I think if we put her here to start with and give her an idle too. So let's go to, let's try this one. Maybe not. Let's try motion puppet. Idles. I think they're all fairly posy, the idles. Okay, well, let's leave it at this. It's not really important for the sake of the demonstration, as they say. So we've got some hand intersections going on there with her, which we can quickly fix with the edit motion there, as you know. So let's just fix her hands briefly on the first frame, and that will fix them. We'll obviously be chopping this animation and overriding it. Right, so let's get going. First thing we want to do is we want to grab the towel, And to do that, we are going to need to see the arrows, because what we're going to do with this character, this male Sean character, is we're going to have him grab one of these arrows, which has a pinpoint, and that will allow him to kind of pull the towel at that point. Now, the gross animation of the towel is still going to be performed at the top layer by this controller here. So we're going to actually animate the gross translation of the towel from the rail across to Ivy at this level. But we're going to change the shape of the towel by moving the relationship of all these arrows in relation to each other. So that's kind of how we're going to do this. So let's now if we put the towel into its start position, like somewhere around here, one of the things we need to do is we need to have this character reach for this. So now I could have him reach for this arrow here, this arrow, but if you've done reaches before, you'll know that the reach point is is not the hand, it's the wrist about here. So what happens is when you reach for an object, it'll actually kind of effectively go through past the object, because the actual pinpoint, the arrow, is right here at the tip of the arrow. So if we grab arrow 3, you can see that that is the gizmo is right at the tip, and that means his wrist will reach for that point, which means his hand will go straight through the towel. So I tend to use a reach object. So I'm going to go to Content Manager, and under my custom folder I have some stuff from a previous project, and these are nothing more than little simple objects. So if I bring this into the scene, this is a simple ball primitive. It's been scaled down and just given a bright red color. I tend to use nautical terminology. This is red port, which is left, and green for starboard on the boat, which is and these are used as reach objects. So the way this is going to work is I'm going to make this object linked to this arrow. So we're going to come up here. We're going to need the scene manager for this, and we're going to come and look for our link options. Here we are, linkage, and we want this from day one, because it doesn't. We're never going to see this. This ball here is actually a dummy object, so it can be hidden whenever we want it to be. So I'm just going to go. I'm going to remove object animation, and I am going to use the pick parent for link. And it is arrow 3 we want to link to. Now we've linked to it, but we actually want it to be positioned exactly where the tip of the arrow is. So to do that, as you know, we now come back to this little dialog here, and this one, link to subnode, will allow us to sort of say, I would like you to link to the position of that arrow. So there we go. And again, now that we've done that link, I'm just going to make sure we've got no animation on it. So now when we play the animation, as you can see, that reach object is now going with the arrow. And we're now going to move that, because obviously when our character reaches, it won't be in the right place, but it'll be reaching for this ball, not the arrow. And that means we can adjust the relationship of the ball to the arrow, and that will allow us to get the hand in the right position where we want it. So let's find a point where we want the reach to happen. Just going to zoom out. Now, we know our sim lasts for a certain length of time, so let's find out when it settles down, which is about there. And then we want to allow some time. So I'm actually going to switch to time code, because that makes it easier for me to judge how many seconds. So sort of comes to a stop about here. So if we allow 3 seconds and then add a couple on, so let's go to 5 seconds, that will do. And this will be our hold at the beginning before anything kind of happens. So let's select Sean. I'm going to put a hold key on him. So let's just bring our timeline up a bit. I'm just going to minimize the project, and let's open up our motion layer. Now he's got a puppet track on him, of course, but we're going to be making him do reaches and stuff like that. So let's turn that on as well. And what I'm going to do here is set a kind of motion layer key for him, just to make sure he's going to remember this position before we kind of make him do the reach and stuff. And then let's go forward, say, to 6 seconds. Let's do the reach. And we're going to be reaching for this red ball. So reach target, right hand, pick, and there we go. So that's the reach. Say right hand, left hand, that'd be useful, wouldn't it? So he's now reaching. But obviously he's not going to touch the ball because he's not close enough. We're going to have to maneuver, his body to a suitable position for that to work. So let's open up the reach track so we can see it. There's going to be a blend on the reach, as we know, so we can see there's a blend there, so we can see when that kind of comes into play. So probably a bit quick for the reach, so let's just move that down a bit. I'm going to bring the blend area back to this motion layer key I've got here, which is my hold key. That's a bit better. Okay, so I'm just going to hold down Alt and scroll to zoom out and give us a bit better view of the timeline. The other thing I'm going to do is at this point here, at the reach, I'm going to break his motion track because I don't really need to see. If I jump to the beginning of the reach, I'm just going to zoom right in, select the motion track and hit break. I'm just going to get rid of that idle, just so we're just going to be using very basic animation techniques for the demo. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the very first frame and I'm going to sort of select, make sure I'm going to twist his body very slightly as a starting position, E to rotate. The reason I'm doing that is so that I don't have to twist his torso all the way around when he hands the towel over. So I'll twist his torso at the beginning and let him pass through that point. So I think that will make sense. Okay, so let's have a look. So he can reach at this point here, and all we need to do now is do some body corrections so he can reach properly for the ball. So I think leaning him forward would be a good thing. So let's do that. We have our hold key on a motion layer. I'm going to go to the reach track, jump to the first frame of that, and then I think now all we need to do is get him in position. So he's still selected, so we just need to go to edit motion layer, and we're just going to pose him. So the first thing we're going to do is shift his weight forward, and then E to rotate. I'm just going to bend his body forward. Now what I might do is, the other thing I want to do is obviously correct his arm a bit. So I'm going to move his waist just away from us very slightly, and that will help pull his arm out. Yeah, he can easily put his weight on that side. And all I'm doing here, as I said, is I'm just simply getting him so he looks like he's bending over. Just going to zoom in a bit, just so we can see where the cloth is. Now, he's reaching for the red ball, so I'm going to just do a Control D. And really what I'm after here is to see his interaction where his hand is going to, because obviously if he's going to reach for the red ball, really that's what's controlling how far he's coming forward. So let's Control D again. I'm going to select the reach hand object, and I'm going to bring it back. Now remember, this is kind of the way the reach works is it goes for the wrist of the character. So I'm just going to pull it back to about here, and then I'm going to remove the object animation from it. Then I'm going to go back to Sean and edit motion layer. And I'm just going to bring him forward. And I'm waiting so that reach hits that ball. See, at this point, his wrist is now kind of being at the location where the ball is. You can see his arm bend at that point. So it's quite an extreme bend over. But let's just, I mean, you can do something more elegant. I think maybe we'll just bend him back just a little bit. And we'll compensate by bringing the ball up so it doesn't look too ridiculous. Maybe something like that. And I will want to come over a bit to the left here because we want to be roughly where that blue arrow is, just from the point of view of how he's going to kind of grab the piece of cloth. So that's kind of maybe something like that. Again, remove object animation, go back to Sean, and I'm just going to correct back a bit. Let's make his other arm look a little less hangy. So I'm just going to bring that over here. Okay, so let's see what that looks like. This is really for demo purposes, so if his motion isn't particularly elegant, I'm not going to worry too much at this point because I just want to show the technique of the cloth. Okay, so there we go. He's now reaching in. Obviously, we can put a ease in, ease out transition curve on him, just so he's not so ugly on the motion, like that. There we go. Now he needs to stand up and he needs to pull the cloth with him. So that's the next thing. So let's hide Ivy, just to make life easy. So let's see how quick he is at. He leans over. Probably a similar amount of time for him to kind of stand back up upright, so he can twist and lift the cloth with him, basically. So let's select Sean and bring him back upright. Now this is going to look a bit odd because obviously he's going to keep reaching for that target object again. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to twist his torso. He's twisting standing on his feet, basically. Now this is going to run his arm through his body again, but you'll see how we'll fix that in a moment, because this frame here where I'm twisting him into the new position is also the one where we're going to move the cloth item. Well, not so much the cloth item, but the entire cloth simulation item. So let's do that. We need to select this one here, and we need to set a transform key for this. So let's make sure this one's in the timeline. Select the transform track, add a key, and we need to set one before here because obviously remember we have a hold on this, so we need to, this is where we're going to have move the cloth to. I'm just putting a key there for the moment, and then we need to put a key, a hold key in, until he kind of actually drags the cloth. So if we ever have a look at his time track, you see his track here, so let's make sure we're dead on this key here, which is where the motion starts. I'm going to go back to the cloth, transform track, add a hold key here. So now I can go forward to the next key, and I'm actually going to now animate the cloth. So we're going to lift it up. Now this is going to look weird because it's not simming anymore, but basically, as you can see, what we're doing is bringing it to a position where it looks like he can hand it over to our other character. Okay, So that's kind of what we're doing here. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to correct the reach object here. So I've got a keyframe here at 513, and then I've got the previous one at 400. So keeping that in mind, I'm going to go to 400 and make sure there's a hold key there. Then I'm going to type in 513, which is the next key. And I'm just going to do a little correction on the reach object so it's a bit more lined up with the blue arrow, because as you can see, it's not quite where the blue arrow's pinpoint is, which is kind of really what we're after. So that's really all I'm kind of doing there, just a little correction on the reach object, because this reach object obviously is still linked to the blue arrow. Let's see what this looks like. Now this is going to look a bit weird because the sim is baked, of course, so let's just wind back. And there's the moment when he pulls, so that's fine. Let's just have a look at that again. And again, with the upright motion of our actor, let's make sure it's selected, and I'm just going to come to here. We've got this motion layer track. Make sure we put a ease in, ease out on it, and that will just smooth it out that little bit. Like there. There we go. Now I'm not going to worry about his elbow kind of doing that little flick there, because as I said, this isn't character animation I'm doing here. This is the cloth thingy. Okay, so what we're actually going to do now is we're going to bunch up these arrows, because we want the cloth to appear as though it's being held by one point here. So, and as it comes off the railing, we want it to give a feeling that it's being pulled by this point here. And the way we're doing that is we need to space the actual arrows themselves out rather than animate the top level. So here is the keyframes on the timeline for the top level piece of cloth. It's not really the cloth, as you know, it's the parent of the entire structure. So let's just have a look at the keys. So we've got a hold key. Again, it's 400 and 513. So those are two good numbers to remember. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to put a transform key on each arrow. So transform, and just hit the plus key on each transform track. Now the reason I'm not double clicking the timeline is because I want all the keys to be on 400. And as you know, if you have the timeline zoomed in anyway, and it's, you could double click here and not actually be on frame 400. So that's kind of why I'm doing that. So there's our hold keys. We can now go to 513, which is our next keyframe. And I'm actually now going to animate these arrows back away from this core one. So I'm simply going to put them in a little group, maybe sort of space them back a bit like this. What this is going to do is it's going to mean parts of the cloth, and I'm selecting them over here in the scene manager. It means parts of the cloth are going to lag behind the one that's being pulled, which is going to be arrow number 3. Okay, and we'll see what this looks like, because what we're going to do is we'll just put the sim back on, and then we'll tweak these depending on the kind of result that we get. So let's do that. Let's wind back to the beginning. We shall turn our simming back on and see what happens. There we go, we're starting to get a nice pull. Now there's going to be some weird things happening, and again I've stopped the sim there. I'm going to turn it off so it's baked, and what you'll see is it doesn't look like a pull yet, and that's purely down to how we decide to make these arrows bunch up. So at the moment I think they need to be bunched a bit more. This one here, for example, is up in the air a bit, and you can see where the pull point is. So really it's just a case of choreographing how these arrows behave. So we've got one arrow here, so let's just jump back to our animation keyframe. So this is the frame where we need to kind of figure out what they're all doing. We can see a bit better what they're doing now, so let's just reposition them so they kind of end up with a result that might kind of look like a bit more natural. So just going to put it nearer the other arrow. Arrow 2 is this one over here. I'm going to bring that nearer as well, and maybe drop it down a bit. And then the far arrow, that needs to come in a lot. And again, probably drop down more than the other arrow. And what I'm effectively doing is I'm bunching the head of the cloth together. Now, obviously, you know when we sim, well, this is the new setup we're going to get. So again, we've done that at 513. Let's back up, turn our sim back on, and sim. Now I'm simming in real time at the moment, so I'm being a bit of a naughty boy. But there you can see we're starting to get a pull happening, which is rather quite nice. So let's make sure frame by frame is on, which will give us more accuracy, of course. And let's sim that through again. So there is the pull. And we now just really need to continue the pull so that he turns all the way around and offers the towel to the other character, and also that the towel completely comes off the rail here. So let's do that next. Again, I'm going to turn the simming off, and let's go and grab Sean and have a look at his keys. So we know we have a motion layer key here, and this is the point where he pulls to at the moment. So I want to do a couple of corrections here. One is I want to fix his right arm quickly, because his right arm is a bit behind his back. So let's just bring his arm out just to some kind of neutral position, so he doesn't look like he's running into his body. So let's have a look. So pull, and then we want to just go forward again and twist him right round, maybe to somewhere like here, so that he fully pulls the cloth off. We could actually, just a quick one, just actually make him look at what he's doing a bit better, because he's not really, looking. And then we go forward in time, maybe to somewhere around here. And let's put him in his end pose. So let's twist him around a bit more. Next, you want him to come all the way round. Maybe have a look up at the other character, who we'll worry about in a moment. Okay, so say this is the position where we want him to end up. Might even also move his body weight over slightly. And then now, of course, we want to animate the cloth position so that we fix his arm, basically. So let's come out of Edit to Motion Layer mode, and we'll go and select our cloth. We have a keyframe. We have our previous keyframe here, which is good, so that's still there. So this is going to be our next keyframe for the cloth. So let's move our cloth over. And now what we're doing is looking to see, probably want to rotate the cloth as well, since you can see it's cutting into his body here. So I'm just going to rotate it a little bit. And then we just need to fix his reach control, because you can see his hand is kind of away from the arrow that's doing the pulling now. So again, this is just a little tweak to kind of fix that. So where we've got a keyframe here of 641, it's a good number to remember. So again, let's make some mods to the reach, and roll is. Of course, I'm actually rolling the reach, and it doesn't need to be, because I need to actually do the roll on his hand, of course. So let's do Sean, edit motion layer. You could, if you wanted, lock the hand perfectly to the reach object and then use that to control the rotations and stuff. But for the moment, I'm just doing it this way. Okay, something like that. Now, obviously, you can spend more time getting a better grip, but I really just want to get this technique through. Okay, so now that we've done that, let's see what the cloth ends up looking like. So wind back to the beginning and turn on our simming, and let's sim. There we are. So let's turn simming off and we'll put real time on. Play it. In fact, let's Control D and hide all the dummies. Okay, well, as you can see, we're getting there. A few little fixes to do. We just need some of the arrows to be a bit further back, so like this one here and things like that. But I think you kind of get the idea. You can spend as much time as you want kind of figuring out where to put these kind of arrows exactly where you need them to kind of get the simulation that you want. So I think what I'll do is I'll just do a quick little fix to a couple of these arrows, and then we'll have the other character kind of grab this object. Okay, I think I'll also move it away from his body a bit more. It's a bit tight to him, so I think I'll move it this way. So let's do that. So back to frame by frame mode. Let's jump back to the previous key, which is 641, and let's move this away from his body, and we can probably lift it up to take the bend, so it's a bit easier for the other character to grab. And then we'll come in and just maneuver a couple of these arrows around just to kind of make the cloth a bit more tight on the arrow that's doing the main pull. Okay, let's sim that. Now again, we've got an abrupt end there, so let's grab Sean, make sure his motion layer is set to ease in, ease out. And don't forget also there's keyframes on the piece of cloth, and this will suffer from the same problem. So when we pull it here, we probably want like an ease in on it, on this one. Then it goes through this keyframe, and let's have an ease out on this one. Okay, so let's see what that looks like. In fact, yeah, sorry, let's wind right back, so we're going to sim again from the top. Otherwise our sim won't be correct if we start it halfway through. Now, because we've done the ease in on the front one, you'll notice his hand's slipping away a bit there. It's getting ahead of the cloth, so the fix for that is to go to this keyframe here and just make some corrections so that he's leaning. But to be honest, we could just remove this ease out, because really it's the end one where you can actually see the jolt. So let's sim that one last time. The start can be quite abrupt. You know, he's pulling a towel off a rail. Would help if I turned simming on, wouldn't it? Okay, so we have the towel in a new position over on the other side, so let's turn that off. Do a Control D to hide everything. Q to drop the tool. A gizmo. Let's just play it in real time, see what it looks like. Okay, now obviously you can spend much more time getting the hand kind of holding onto the cloth a bit better, but you kind of get the idea of what's going on here. So now the cloth is in this position here, we can kind of do the handover to the other character. So she just needs to be able to reach for the two corners of this cloth and then take over from our male character. Let's get Ivy unhidden. So it looks like we're going to have to sort of step her back a bit, which is fine. We just need to kind of get it so that she's in a good position to kind of reach for the towel. Now she's got a motion clip on it, as we know. I think what I'll do is I'll just reposition her and reapply that motion clip at this point. It'll be much easier, so I'm just going to maybe have her do the reach somewhere around here so it's not too extreme for her to be able to lean forward and grab that. And then I'm going to do remove object animation. Now I actually could have put an idle on her, but I'm not going to bother because I just want to show you the handover. You can obviously do what I did before, which is put a whole lot of motions on it and get to a certain point and then take over with things like edit motion layer or other animation clips. Here's the point here where our other character comes to a stop. So let's just check where that is. That was at 641, I believe. It certainly was. We're going to make this her reach frame, and to make her grip the cloth properly, we actually need her to have some reach objects too. So if I do a Control D, we can see all our dummies again. The thing here is we need to give her some objects to reach for as well. So let's go to the Content Manager. Actually, let's go to the Scene Manager. I'm going to rename it. So we've got this reach left hand, so let's call this Sean left hand. So we know that's his one. And then we're going to go to the Content Manager. I'm going to go back and do this all the way back here at frame 1 or timecode 0, because we're going to put a red ball on this one arrow here, and we're going to put a green ball on this arrow. Bring out another one of our reach objects, and again I'm going to use the link feature. And I'm going to link to arrow number 1. Actually, it needs to be linked to arrow number 4. So we can just switch the arrow here. So you can see you've got arrow 4, and I want to do a position. So that puts that one there, right at the beginning of our whole scene. Let's get our green reach hand object in. And again, I made these little balls using default object, just colored them. No big deal. So again, pick parent, and this one will be arrow number 1, except you need to open the dialog and make sure it snaps to the position. So now when we play the animation, of course, we now get those balls following those arrows, which means we have something now for Ivy to reach for. So at 641, this is where she's going to kind of reach for those two objects. Now, as before, we will move the two objects, when we see where exactly our hands are now. If the arrows are getting in the way, obviously we don't want to use Control D because everything goes. We can just hide the arrows here individually, and that way we'll just see the reaching objects because we know that they're linked to those two arrows. So we don't really need to see the arrows. Okay, so this is the point where we want her to have reached for the towel, and we want to start the reach before this, and we've already got a keyframe, so let's grab Ivy, and again down here on the motion layer track I'm going to highlight it and I'm going to put a hold key on it, and then we have another key as we know before that, which is this key here. If I select Sean and I jump back a key, 513 was the previous key, so I'm going to select Ivy again, and again the motion layer track and force a key there. That's going to be our hold key for our character. So now we can jump to this key, and now we can set the reach at this point on this this keyframe. So reach target. This is the left, reach left hand, and then we select the right hand and go reach right hand. I accidentally got the cloth there, notice that. Let's do that again. It's not, this cloth's kind of getting in the way a bit there. That's better, there we go. Okay, so now she's doing her reach, and it's a case now of making it, as I said, making it kind of look a bit more natural. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bend her forward slightly, because she's kind of, her back's a bit tilted back here, so let's do that. We've already got our hold key, so we know we can come in here and we can just do a little bit of leaning. That will let her arms come down a bit. And I think what we might do is compensate by having the cloth item higher in frame, because right now it's a bit low for her to kind of grab it. She's stretching her arms a bit. What we can do here is we can lift the cloth up. So if we go and find our cloth object here, we can see that we also have a keyframe for that at 641. So I like to try and keep my keys all kind of aligned so that little adjustments like this kind of work. So we can go with something like that, and now it's just a case of going to the reach hand. Now these two reach hands have no keys on them at all yet, so we need to kind of make sure that we have a hold key for them. In fact, actually we don't need a hold key, we're just going to set them where their offset works for this particular frame, because prior to that we don't really care. And then we'll just do a remove object animation on them. Again, I'm just going to... Now this might be useful to see the arrows, so let's turn the arrows on, because these are the two arrows that we're trying to find. This is the pinpoint right here. We just need to make sure it looks like her hand is kind of lining up roughly with the pinpoint. So let's do that one, and then hand reach R. Like so, something like that. And now again, just don't forget, just remove object animation. So if I just hide those, and hand reach left, remove object animation, hand reach right, remove object animation. So those will now sort of be at that point. So you can see she's got her reach there. It's handover time. At this frame, we also want to have our male character Sean release the actual towel. Let's just jump back, so it's 641. Yep, so that's going to be Sean's release. Select Sean, go to release target, and as you can see, he's still locked on at this point. So this is going to be our release. So he's now going to let go. Now any release will have a blend area. He will go back to whatever motion he was doing previously. So you can see there he's kind of letting go, and she's now got the towel. Okay. Now there's a whole load of niceties you could do at this point where he lets go, or immediately after, and that is animating the arrows, these dummy arrows, so that the cloth looks like, you know, he's let go of it. So that's something else that you might want to consider. Let's have a look and see what it looks like. He releases at this point, which is the 641. So maybe about here we'll just do a little set of keys on the arrows. Let's zoom in. And it's the middle arrows we want to kind of probably correct. Drop that one down. This is the main one, this is the one he was holding on to. That one should flop down so that they're more at a sort of similar level or lower than the other two. So I think that would be a good starting point. So again, I think switch to frame by frame, go back to the beginning, drop the gizmo, Control D, and let's turn on simming. Just run that through. Okay. Back to real time. And there's things we'll need to fix, like, you know, he's got a bit of a problem with his arm when he turns early and stuff like that. But again, I'm not going to fix stuff like that. You've got the idea. You can put in whatever extra number of keys you want to finesse something like this once you understand, you know, the technique that I'm trying to get across. So she's now got hold of the simulation, and now she needs to just needs to wrap it around her waist. So we already know that we have a main key on our cloth here at 641. So after he releases, his hand's going through there, but you can always deal with little animation stuff like that afterwards. We need to position the cloth so that she can put it around her body. So maybe go to about here, and I'm not going to turn simming back on yet. I'm just going to reposition our main cloth item so that it's running across the front of her body. Now I am going to bring everything back. So what I want to do now is I'm looking to see where all of these arrows are going to fall, because I need them to all now spread out so that it looks like she's going to make the cloth be able to go around her waist. Let's see what that looks like for speed. We want a bit quicker, so let's just bring that key forward a bit. There we go. Okay, and again, this can be done with you know, ease in and ease outs and stuff like that. So let's just put an ease in on that one. There we go. That looks a bit better. That little flick you saw on the cloth is his hand passing through the sim, and you can fix that by just raising his hand up away from the cloth so that when he lets go, he doesn't kind of let his hand pass through it. For now, I'm just going to leave it. And now after this point, we kind of want to spread the cloth out. We can do it a bit earlier, so she grabs it here. What I can do is go to this frame, make sure we're on it by jumping to it, and now what we want to do is actually alter the arrows. So let's find out which one we need. Arrow number 4. And we're just going to lift that out, maybe over here a bit, and back, sort of like that. So she's stretching it out. We can do the same with arrow number 3 and spread that out now. And all I'm doing here, as I say, is I'm just looking to make these arrows position themselves so that they're going to allow the towel to wrap around her body. Now we've done that, we just need to sim up to that point. So frame by frame, and turn our simming on. And our simming off. That's looking pretty good. So all we need to do now is just put it around her waist. So there's the key where it arrives. So I might just make that let's try and ease in, ease out and see what that looks like. Yeah, that's better. So I've just done that on the top level piece of cloth. I just put an ease in, ease out on it. I haven't done any easing in and out on the arrows at all. If you want to get into that level, you could dig down to that level. So now that she's got it to this position, let's put it around her waist. So let's do the wrap. It's going to wrap it, and what we're going to do is we're actually going to animate the arrows to this position. Now I want to make sure the arrows have a hold frame. We're going to animate them all now, so for safety I think what I'll do is jump back to the previous key which is this one, and I'm going to make sure every single arrow has a hold key. Okay, that's good. So now we can go forward and animate these. I'm just going to scrub to find out where we want the wrap to occur. So maybe somewhere around about here. Let's do 860. Nice round number. And now we just need to animate the arrows back. So let's just going to pull them back and maybe in a bit. Same with the other side. Now we don't need to see Sean anymore, so let's just hide Sean while we're doing this. We want to keep the other two arrows near, mostly around the front, so that it looks like, it's in front of her waist. So we're just going to use those to hold the cloth away from her body, basically, as she kind of does this. Okay, so let's see what we've got. So we can sim again. So back to the beginning, by frame, and turn sim on. Let's see what we have. Now we've got some pass-through there's going on, but that's not an overt issue because we haven't turned collision detection on properly for her yet. So we need to look at the collision shapes that she's got on her body. So it's actually starting to work quite nicely, as you can see. And what you're more than likely to do, by the way, is, when she does this, you're probably only going to let it go so far. And then what you're going to do is you're going to cut away to another shot, because sometimes you just cannot ever get something like this to work perfectly. So you should always indulge in the usual editorial tricks. So let's just go to the last key here. I'm just going to maybe pull this arrow out slightly away. And what we're going to do now is if I hide our cloth, just do a quick save, and I'm going to turn on, I'm going to select Ivy, let's do a Control D, and I want to find our collision shapes. So let's go collision shapes. Now, the main thing I want to do is at the moment the entire body is kind of active, so I'm actually going to deactivate the ones that I don't want, so they're only really left with the parts of the body that we actually want the cloth to collide with. So we can just go through and simplify the collision by just turning all of this off. Might leave that one on. Let's show the shapes. So with this one here, what we want to do is look at the side. The capsule probably needs to be a lot bigger because we saw the pass-through occurring in a sort of thigh. So we kind of need to scale up the capsule. So let's do something like that. Let's look at the other thigh. Now the other thigh wasn't suffering from a pass-through, but we could, for good measure, just make it a bit larger. And then we can just check. I think we'll leave that for the moment and see what we get. So let's just do a resim now. So let's bring our cloth back. We've got our simming still on and we're in by frame, so let's run it. Okay, that's actually working pretty well. Well, we could take it a step further and pull the two side bits back a bit more if we wanted to, but you can kind of see how it's working. We could also raise the cloth up slightly so it's a bit more up on her waist. So let's just quickly try that. We've got our key transform key here, so let's jump back to it and let's lift the whole cloth solution up a bit and Control D, and let's grab our far arrow. Maybe just bring it back a little bit more. I mean, obviously if you do this too much you can break your sim quite easily, so you do have to kind of play around with all of this just to see if it's working or if you've gone too far. So really it is trial and error to get something that you like to work with. Okay, so let's try that. Let's go to the end key here. Bring those two in. See if that makes a better fit. Okay, back to the beginning. Hide dummies. Q to drop the gizmo. And let's sim again. Okay, that's pretty good. The only thing I'd say is that the last little bit of a wraparound could happen a bit quicker, and that simply is going to be a case of pulling these last keyframes forward for these two arrows. You can see they've got the furthest key, which is here. So let's see where that is. 860. So let's bring it back maybe to about here. That's 813. And let's do the same with this one. Bring that back. Let's make sure it's on 813. I'm just going to zoom in fully to frame level. Just make sure they're both on the same. So I think we'll try that. With a bit of luck, this will be our final solution. Okay. Yep. Okay. So sim. Now, one thing I noticed there, you probably noticed it, is the sim is coming off the rail as it pulls. It's sliding just off the rail there. If the rail doesn't allow that, then obviously it's not a problem. In this particular scenario, we could compensate just by sliding the cylinder along. So in this case, I could actually just make it a bit longer just to compensate for that. Like so. Let's get Sean back. And let's do one last sim from the whole lot. So by frame, simming on. Let's do a quick save, always good. And let's just let this run. Right, there we have it. So 1004, so let's just chop our animation down to 1000 frames. So that's all we need to turn off our simulation. Now we've got real time. So we've baked. In fact, let's hide that. There we go. Now, obviously, finesse-wise, you can make the animations look a hell of a lot nicer. You can do a lot with the hands to make sure they grip the cloth better by careful animation of the hands. But really, I'm just showing you how this whole passover technique works with this particular cloth item, which, as you can see, if I do the unhide all the dummies, you can see is all to do with the 4 arrows that are pinned to the cloth. And it's a combination of animating the core cloth element itself, the hierarchy, and then animating the individual arrows themselves to get the kind of motion that you want during the course of the animation. So really it's just a case of figuring out where all those keys need to be. But there you go. That's kind of it, really. It appears quite time consuming, but sometimes when you want to do certain things in certain packages, you don't have much option, as they say. Anyway, hope that is of use to somebody.